systems if they had file systems, and it would be some of the most sensitive information I would get on the pen test, because what do you print and fax out? Forms, checks, bank information. It's usually really sensitive documents that are going through your printers and fax machines. So to speak to the stealth, no one pays attention to these embedded systems until they're broken. So if you look up the definition of an embedded system, it's a special purpose-built device. It's built to perform one small function. If it's performing that function, usually people leave it alone. How many dusty Linksys routers that haven't been touched in years are sitting in your family, friends, neighbors' houses, and then you get a call, why? Because it's not working. You don't get a call because, you know, it's been running really good for a while. I was just wondering if you can come check up on it. No, you only get the call when it breaks. So that's one of the advantages that you have, is no one's really looking or paying attention to these devices. Security is often left out as a byproduct of the industry. And what I've noticed, especially in home-based routers, having done a lot of work in that area, I've noticed that whoever can put out the cheapest router wins. Whoever can put out not just the cheapest router, but the cheapest router with the most features wins. And there's always new technology and new features coming up for people to put out new and cheaper routers. So by cutting cost of putting more functionality on a single chip, by leaving things out like security, they can produce a cheaper router, and they'll do whatever it takes to be that company, Linksys, Cisco, D-Link, Netgear. Like, what's the difference between those routers? The guts in them are essentially the same. It's whoever can manufacture it the cheapest. That has led to extremely poor security on these devices, and I'll show you some really good examples of that. And of course, there's no interactive user. It's not a computer where someone's going to maybe run an antivirus scan or look at what's going on. A lot of times there's no full-time interactive user. There's ways to interact with a device, but not in the same way you would with a regular computer. To speak more to stealth, you know, everyone that's looking for a vulnerability to raise awareness on this subject doesn't have every model and firmware version available. So there isn't, like, if I had the entire line of D-Link routers, that would be great. If someone wants to send that to me, I would gladly accept it, and I'd send you a PaulDotCom t-shirt or something. But, so every researcher out there doesn't have access to the vulnerability. Someone was asking me, well, have you looked into the HP printer vulnerabilities recently and how you can pivot across those? I said, well, no, because I can't, well, legally get access to those devices in order to do testing. I'm more than happy to do it, but I just don't have a $10,000 HP printer laying around at home. And I hate printers, so I would never go seek that out unless someone wanted to give me one to do security testing with. So purpose-built usually means easy. They want, a lot of times when it comes to embedded systems, for whatever the purpose, I mean, let's use the wireless router as an example, you want the user to go buy it, take it home, plug it in, and magic, it works. And in order to accomplish that, security just gets in the way of that whole experience. And you know, they've got these new fancy buttons now that you can push and sync up keys and all that stuff. That's only really one part of the security equation, and that's helped to a certain degree. But easy doesn't always equal security, as everyone knows. So, and I said, you know, vendors are focused on profit and competition. I talked about that. So the other thing that I wanted to prove, so now we've talked about power, we've talked about money, we've talked about stealth. Let's talk about ubiquity. How widespread are these devices enough that we could use them to assert power and stealth and gain money? And one of the resources that I found to help build my case was Wiggle. Has anyone gone to wiggle.net? A couple of people? So wiggle.net, there's a bunch of people right now war driving, like 802.11 war driving, looking for open wireless access points right now, and they're sending their data, all the access points that they found, and their geographic information, and they're uploading it to wiggle.net, and wiggle.net is crunching all of that data and producing the results from, you know, almost thousands of people that are war driving. All the statistics are on their site. But one of the interesting things that I found was they talked about, has some graphs about manufacturer stats. So what we have here is these are the total number of networks found. Now, I like to think that they're unique, and I like to think that they look at a network as a unique BSSID or the wireless MAC address, so that these are actually unique networks. So there's almost 2 million networks in there. Is that 2 million? Yeah. 2 million networks, is it? Yes. So they have no SSID, and there are 1.7 million with Linksys. Well, that tells me Linksys got some good permeation out there. So if I want to go start attacking devices, Linksys might be a good target because it's the default SSID for Linksys routers. And then, hey, look, here's Netgear and Belkin and Action Tech. That tells me these are the major manufacturers producing the most routers. So if I want to assert the most amount of control, stealth, and gain the most money, these are the ones that I want to target. And there are some more manufacturer statistics over here as well that are giving numbers in the millions of these devices that are deployed. And again, you're not just compromising one computer when you compromise these systems. You could be compromising multiple. What if it's in something like a coffee shop or a conference center? Score, right? Because now there's tons of people coming through there and you're getting all kinds of juicy stuff and compromising workstations that are transient. And just to give you a visual representation of just how permeated a city like Boston would be with wireless, this is wiggles.net, and they've overlaid their information onto Google Maps. So you can go look up your city or town and see what your wireless is like. All those little red dots and green dots are access points. I believe the green dots are open access points, and the red represents encryption. I think WEP would count as encryption as much as it shouldn't, but I think it does. So now we know we can use them to gain power. You can use them to make money. We can be stealthy. They're everywhere. Now we just need to prove that they're vulnerable. And this was as much fun as it was harassing my wife to talk about taking over the world, this was the most fun part for me, is to find out vulnerabilities on some of these routers. Now, there was a project from researchers at Columbia University, and they scanned millions and millions of IP addresses on the internet, and they found that I think it was 1% or 21,000 routers, webcams were open to remote attack as their administrative interfaces were wide open for everyone to see. And it was good research. I applaud their research, and I hope that they continue to do that and raise awareness on this issue. However, they published in the article, this is a press article about the researchers from Columbia. They said, the researchers have provided ISPs with their findings in hope that they will do something to protect vulnerable customers. Do you think they did that? No. So, and here's a good example of an ISP that has not done that, and this is Time Warner. We'll use as an example. No one from Time Warner's here in the room, right? Okay, good. So there was a person that figured out, I forget if it was he set a different cookie in his browser or disabled, I think it was disabled JavaScript. He figured out he could go in and log into the administrative interface of any router that was on the Time Warner network of a certain model. And he figured out this, huge security hole. Basically, with no security, he can go log into any router. And the Time Warner said, well, we can't really do anything about it, was their response. And you can go read the whole story, but that's the gist of the story. Really bad vulnerability. Time Warner goes, so what? However, in the article it said, Time Warner says the SMC 8014 modem routers are just a small portion of the 14 million devices its customers were using. I said, wow, 14 million devices. Wouldn't I like to get some of that, huh? That would help for my plot to take over the world for sure. So I set out to find some example vulnerabilities, knowing all of the good things they can get me in my plot to take over the world, and knowing that ISPs, like Time Warner, aren't patching vulnerabilities, and knowing that there's some vulnerabilities out there. So there are tons of fail on the internet with respects to wireless routers. One of the ones I researched on my own, independent of someone may or may not have scanned about 50 million IP addresses on the internet. Nothing to see here. And one of the other vulnerabilities I found was the HNAP vulnerability, which I'll talk about. We'll talk about one example with printers, and one example is on my Roku player that I found some really bad security fail, and then we'll get into the rest of the project that we're working on. So what if Bob right? We use Bob. Anytime we do something or there's something